Welcome to the Let Life Begin podcast, a teaching ministry of Dr. Philip Dunn, Senior Pastor of First Mount Juliet Church. In this podcast, Dr. Dunn will share biblical principles with real-life application. Thank you for listening today.
Welcome to the Let Life Begin podcast, and this week we're going to pick up our Bible reading in 2 Samuel, the first 4 chapters, several Psalms, and 1 Chronicles 1 through 6. So again, it's in chronological order, so there's a lot of different passages in each of these books. But let's start with 2 Samuel. 2 Samuel begins where 1 Samuel ends. It begins with the death of Saul and Jonathan, so we get David's great lament over the death of King Saul and then Jonathan. It's that famous expression, how the mighty have fallen in battle. I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You're very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of women. And, you know, what we should take from that is they had a special friendship indeed. You know, Jonathan really was the rightful heir to the throne. But Jonathan never shrunk back from seeing the call of God in the life of David. And even to his own life, the risk of his own life, he defended the honor of David and helped him escape the hands of his father as his dad was losing his mind in jealousy. So you read through these first few chapters of 2 Samuel, and David is anointed as king. And of course, nothing is ever just easy. There was the battle they had to just fight out between David's house and Saul's. Of course, David prevails. A couple verses I want to point out to you this week. I love it. It says this, that all the tribes came to Israel. This is verse 1 of chapter 5. All the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, we are your flesh and blood. In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel in their military campaigns. And the Lord said to you, you will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler. And then the Bible goes on to say David was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned 40 years. I want us to remember that as God was giving his people a king, and as we read through the failed leadership of King Saul, and we see the heart of a king that loved God in the life of King David, that the kings really were like the shepherds of God's people. I mean, we're talking about a true theocratic system of government. I mean, they were serving God. God would speak through his prophets, and the king was to know the word and to be a representative of God to the people, and as a shepherd to God's people. They were to be people of righteousness. You know, that's a high calling, but that's what God had instructed for them. That's what his will was. You also find in chapter 5 that the city of David is discovered or initiated. David captures Zion. It's called the Fortress of Zion, which is the city of David. Today we have the town of David. We think of Bethlehem, where David was born. And then we have the city of David, which is on the slopes there of Mount Zion. And in Jerusalem today, it's the city of David, where David's palace would have been. And when you think of David, his name is renowned. I mean, God initiates in 2 Samuel, we'll see this in a couple weeks, God initiates one of the great covenants of the Old Testament with him. But just notice that God was letting him take and shore up his position as the king, a rightful king of leadership, and David became king at one of the most peaceful times in the kingdom. Notice in 1 Chronicles, kind of the other place that we'll be reading, it's not as fun reading, and here's why. It's a bunch of genealogies. And I know we can get lost in this, but if I just point this out to you, it begins with Adam. Why is that important? Well, because we go back to creation and God's people. Remembered, if they were in post-exile, coming back into the land when God wrote this, well, then they were remembering the creation account, where this all started, God's faithfulness and his promises all the way down from Adam to Noah, so on and so forth, Abraham, and you come through just the 6th chapter of this week, and you'll see by the end, it chronicles through the kings of Judah, which would include King David, an emphasis upon this remnant that God preserved. We aren't there yet, but we're going to read about how the kingdom is split into two, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. That comes later. But for now, David is going to rule over all of the tribes, and a total of some 40 years, although initially it was not all of them, but it will become all of them. And it did become all of them. So just keep those two things in mind as you read over in 1 Chronicles, that God is faithfully raising up the shepherd king. And then we have a lot of Psalms. I guess the one Psalm I want to point out to you, and you read a lot of them in this particular passage, is out of Psalm 78. I alluded to it earlier, but I just love these Psalms because they recount sometimes the history of God and his work among his people. Well, check this out. Psalm 78, verses 71 through 72, says that he chose David his servant and took him from the sheep pens. From tending the sheep, he brought him to be the shepherd of his people Jacob, of Israel his inheritance. And David shepherded them with integrity of heart, and with skillfulness of hands he led them. Notice those two things. These are great leadership principles. Integrity of heart, skillfulness of hands. He had character, and he had competency. What was his character? That he loved God. What was his competency? The Lord was with him. What is one of the themes of 1st, 2nd Samuel's and 1st, 2nd Samuel, 1st, 2nd Kings and Chronicles? The need for God's presence among his people. And how was that accomplished? Well, it would be accomplished through the building of a temple. More on this, because remember, they'd had that tabernacle for some 40 years in the wilderness. You have the time period of the judges. The ark would be returned. And then ultimately, God would let it be that a temple that would encase, as it were, the very presence of God on earth would be built through this kingship, the kingdom of David. And God would do something with that was enduring, that would bring and last us all the way through the Old Testament into the New Testament. So I hope the Word will come alive in your heart. I pray that it'll come alive in your heart this week. Read these Psalms. Read these passages carefully. Let the Word come alive in your heart. And we'll pick back up the rest of 2 Samuel here, and then also Chronicles and some more Psalms. Have a wonderful week, and Lord willing, we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Let Life Begin podcast with Dr. Dunn. For more content, follow us on social media platforms and on Spotify. Thank you again for listening.